Greetings, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Erudite Magic with me, your host, Jeff Kowalk. In today's episode, I have a number of exciting things to share with you, not the least of which is Ozzy Wynn's new book, Before We Begin. Not only is this a book review, I'm also going to share with you, my Erudite viewers, some thoughts I have about other books that might be good resources as an alternative to this, and there is an interview that was left undone in this book that I personally carried out via a recent trip that I made. So stay tuned to the end to hear the very special interview I made related to the contents of this book. Ozzy Wynn. You probably don't need me to tell you who that is if you've been into magic for the last 10 years or so. In case you don't already know, Ozzy Wynn is David Blaine's favorite magician. He's a consultant with David Blaine and has performed and lectured all over the country. Originally from Israel, he is now a native of New York City and has previously published his book Repertoire, as well as some tricks and some other lecture notes. If you haven't already seen the video review of Repertoire, I highly recommend it, if nothing else, than to gaze at the gorgeous hand-painted art that adorns the book. Enough about Ozzy. What is the book? The book is all about pre-show, which in mentalism speak means obtaining some information before the show to use during the show. That's it in the broadest sense of the word. Of course, the actual real work is more nuanced than that, and Ozzy will walk you through that in all 147 pages of this hardbound Vanishing Inc. book. Since I mentioned that it is a Vanishing Inc. book, I think it goes without saying that it is absolutely gorgeous. The cover is this black, almost faux leather-like surface with some very nice red accents to the chairs as an individual sits here by themselves before the show. While there aren't any pictures or really even any line drawings, they're totally unnecessary, and the book does come with a very lovely red ribbon to mark your spot while you're reading, a trademark of Ozzy Wynn's books thus far. In a nutshell, what is the book? I've already described what pre-show is. If you don't know how it's used, you're not alone, and that's really why Ozzy wrote this book. He felt like there just wasn't a whole lot of information out there in the magic world about pre-show, and that has led a lot of magicians to be a little bit tense or afraid of using pre-show in their shows. Not only does Ozzy walk you through what pre-show is, how you can use it, the methods and steps to take to deploy pre-show successfully, he's also going to give you that boost of confidence in knowing that after you read this book, you're going to be equipped to do it in a way that won't leave you vulnerable to getting caught. He's quick to dispel the notion that pre-show involves stooging. I think in the interviews in the back, oh yes, there is a rather nice section in the back where he interviews luminaries such as Max Maven, Penn of Penn and Teller, and Luke Germain, all from a different vantage point of what pre-show means to them and their thoughts on the subject. Anyway, he breaks it down into several easy-to-read chapters to walk you through what you need to know, and then how you might use it, giving you a variety of options, and even gives you a few of his own scripts that he personally uses in his pre-show rituals. He starts off with some negative examples that will likely sound very familiar to anyone who's even thought about pre-show, and then quickly gets you into how you might be able to use this more effectively. As with anything, pre-show is simply one tool in a mentalist or magician's belt and shouldn't be overused, and Ozzy's quick to point that out. So, who might this book appeal to? From my viewpoint, I think that this is a book for someone who is just starting their journey into mentalism and maybe doesn't have a super strong grasp of what pre-show already is or how to deploy similar methods to that. That's not to say that if you're already an experienced mentalist, you won't get anything. Far from it. I certainly think there's value in this book for the experienced mentalist who maybe hasn't gone out and attempted pre-show. They know a little bit about it. They might have done it once, but they haven't done it routinely. I think this is the perfect book to explain to you the right situations and places to use it to yours and your audience's advantage. If you are a brand new beginner in magic and you haven't really even dipped your toes very much into mentalism and are more into the mental magic side of things, you're probably not going to find a lot of value, and maybe you weren't even interested in this to begin with. Don's Magic and Books is sponsoring this episode of Erudite Magic. He has a great selection of both used and new material, so if you've been waiting to buy this book or any others that Don has, now is the time to take advantage of this code and save. This week, if you apply the code PRESHOW, all one word, don't worry, I'll put it down in the description below. If you apply that code, you can save 10% on everything that Don has to offer at his website, which includes books, DVDs, props, and more. By the way, he offers free shipping on media purchases over $20 in the continental United States, and if you're international, be sure to email him because he will give you the actual cost of shipping so that you know you're getting a fair deal. So what did I like? I really liked Ozzy's methodical, logical approach to the pre-show, going over common pitfalls and also telling you how you might use versions of it as an open pre-show where everyone knows that you approach the person ahead of the show, or a half-open pre-show where they think you approach someone for one reason, but maybe it was for a slightly different one, as well as the completely secret pre-show or using one of your assistants. So there's lots of different ideas for different performance venues and situations, as different as the number of performers out there. For sure, if you're thinking about pre-show, there's something in here for you. Now, what did I not like so much? In some ways, I felt like I got the message early on, and I don't know that the book needed to be as thick as it was. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it. It was a quick, easy read, and even though it's 147 pages, to me it read much faster than that, especially for a book without pictures or drawings. Ozzy gives you lots of concrete examples from his own and other people's work to punctuate each of the points that he's trying to make, and so in some ways that's what I think helps it to read so easily. As good as this book is on the subject of pre-show, it is actually not the best work I've ever read on pre-show. And in fact, it's not even the best Vanishing Inc. material that I've read on pre-show. No, that distinction belongs to Florian Severin's What Lies Inside. Now, I reviewed this book quite a long time ago when I was first starting out in my reviews, and in that review, I mentioned that there is an entire chapter dedicated to the topic of pre-show in this book. And after I read Ozzy's Before We Begin, I went back and I reread the chapter from What Lies Inside that pertains to pre-show. And frankly, I still think that the best write-up on pre-show is included in this book. So as much as I like this book, I still think that What Lies Inside, Florian Severin, is more succinct and still covers almost all of the same things that Ozzy's book covers. And in some cases, I think it covers them slightly better. Now, I'm not trying to be unfair. I still think there's a lot of value in this book Before We Begin. And to be totally fair, What Lies Inside is out of print, at least for now. So it's possible that that information on pre-show is secreted out there for those who already own the book. But if you can get your hands on it, I think that this is another complimentary resource on the subject of pre-show and will aid in your understanding. I don't think it has to be an either-or approach. But back to Ozzy's book, I did enjoy it, and although there aren't any tricks taught in the book, he does give you 2 scripts to personal routines of his, so there's certainly some worth there. Plus, there's the interviews I already mentioned with Luke Germain, Max Maven, and Penn Jillette, which I thought were fantastic resources. The section with Penn Jillette doesn't really have to do with pre-show in a mentalist's world, although he touches on that. It has more to do with understanding and setting the mood for your show, which I thought was super cool. Ozzy provides some of the history behind pre-show, and Max Maven touches on some of that as well as his own well-known connection with pre-show in his outstanding effect, Four-Sided Triangle. Luke Germain is one of the best thinking mentalists out there, so of course I enjoyed reading what he had to say about pre-show and how he applies it for his own act. At the very beginning of the book, Ozzy talks about the different types of pre-show, including coming out and choosing your volunteers before you get into that part of the act. And in that section, he talks about Mac King being one of the best at this. I thought it was funny that he wrote this book and he touts Mac King for several paragraphs there, and yet he wasn't one of the performers that Ozzy chose to interview. I decided that it would be up to me to rectify that situation, so if you've been along this far, I am very pleased to share with you my interview with Mac King about his technique for audience selection and how he goes about it. let's play the clip of my interview with Matt King. Talk to him a little bit about his participant selection process and maybe a few things about your pre-show ritual, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I would say, Jeff, that no one reminds me of Ossie more than you. So I think you stepping in for him is like seamless.
Okay. So the question that I have for you, one of the questions I've always wondered is, how did you land on the song "If You're Happy and You Know It"?
Oh, well, I didn't think of it, first of all.
Okay.
There was a guy in St. Louis, a friend of mine, Al Canal, and Al was a stand-up comic initially when I first met him, and then he started managing comedy clubs. He worked for the Funny Bone chain, and so Al decided that would be a good idea in his clubs, and he did it only in a couple of different places. I know he did it in Springfield, Missouri, and someplace else. But the first time I worked there, when he was doing that, I'm like, this is genius, Al. This is like, these adults are into it, right? And so I'm like, would you mind if I ever do my own show? And so when I got this job here in Las Vegas at the Maxim with my own show, I'm like, Al, remember you said, I'm giving you one opportunity to take that back. And he said, no, it's yours, go. And so that was Al Canal's idea.
Wow.
So I owe Al, thank you. I've thanked him many times, but thanking him again. So that, if you're happy, and it's like, so it's because you can also be, you can be backstage and listening, and you can sort of gauge how the first few minutes of the show are going to go by how enthusiastic people are. Right. And it's like having an opening act. I mean, one of the reasons people have opening acts is to sort of get people to, make the audience a cohesive unit before they come out, right? That serves that purpose in 2 minutes, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, sometimes, though, it serves the opposite. Sometimes people look around and they go, we're in the wrong place. This is not for me. I'm not doing this bull.
Right.
But I mean, that's not that rare. That's pretty rare for that to happen.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I've always wondered.
Yeah, so that's where that came from. So I didn't think of it. I wish I could claim, screw Al Canal. Yeah, that's my big idea.
He took it from you. Right?
Yeah. And you don't have my permission anymore, Al.
How quickly, when you come out on stage, when you're picking people, you always pick the right people for your...
Well, I don't always, but I'm trying, and I'm getting better. I get better at it. I feel like over the years I've gotten better. One of the things I'm doing is, during that rope trick, I mean, I've done that so many times. I've done that, a version of it. I mean, it's evolved over the years, but I've done it for, since I was 15, a version of that trick. And so I can really do it without thinking about it and without looking at it. Mm-hmm. So I'm scoping out the first few rows that I can see. And so, and I pick, depending on the show, but there's there's the first woman who comes up, then there's a kid, then there's a man for the guinea pig trick, and then there's a couple, and then there's the last guy. So there's 6 people in a normal show that I pick. And so the last guy is the first guy I scope out. Because I'm looking for, he's the most specific, right? I got to have a guy with a watch and who seems to be enjoying himself. I like it if he's also there with a woman, because he's not going to, sometimes if it's a group of guys, they'll try to show off for each other to, be a dick to the magician,
right.
Which I don't mind that as much anymore. I kind of like that challenge. So that's the criteria. He seems to have an expressive face,
right.
And there's also some angle stuff. Like for the drink production at the end, I like him to be on my left, seated. So those things combine. So I look for that guy first, and so then once I got him in my brain, then I kind of look for a kid for the woman, who's the very first person. And again, the criteria is the same. Expressive face. I've had much luck lately with picking older women who are outgoing older women. The reason I picked the first two, the kid and the man, before the woman is I don't want to pick. I'm trying to spread it from family to family. I don't want people. I don't want people to go, everybody was from the same group. Probably just one group that he hires, right? So so the more I can spread that out, and in different parts of the room,
Make the show feel bigger.
Yeah, it makes the show feel bigger. And also, you know, I mean, for a couple of them, I walk out into the audience too. And so it helps to, in just a tiny little way, I don't know how big of a help, but it does help for me to have a presence in all the corners of the room too.
Right.
So
that's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
Like I said, I thought that reading about it, Ozzy makes a great point that you do a tremendous job of selecting people for those tricks, and I thought I would.
Yeah. So there's and the other thing. I mean, I sort of made it like you know, I'm only looking for this expressive person, but there's another criteria too. Somebody that the first impression is that you like them too, right? You know,
Right.
So that's another important little thing.
Great. Thank you. Wasn't that great to hear from Matt King? If you liked hearing from him, tune in next week because I'm having an entire episode dedicated to an interview with him to talk about books, how they affected his life, and what he recommends for books in yours. If you are one of those people who's kind of on the bubble about doing pre-show, I really think that this book could help you understand exactly what you need to do, and more importantly, make you comfortable with using the technique and not being so concerned about getting caught or what happens if it doesn't work. You're probably wondering, does it get the Erudite Magic stamp of approval and recommendation? It's your money, and the book is $60. If you are a new mentalist, I think this could be really, really worthwhile. If you're just a magician and you're only thinking about doing some mentalism in the future, I might hold off until you have some of the more classic mentalism techniques down pat and have used them, maybe put together a show and performed it a few times, because let's face it, pre-show is not going to work for everyone. For me, I am a corporate mentalist, and so I don't have as much call to use pre-show. I'm still glad I got the book. I enjoyed reading about Ozzy's approach as well as the interviews that he did, and I certainly feel like if I decide to use pre-show, I understand better how to deploy it and some practical aspects of what makes it work well. But as always, your mileage may vary. So all that to say, do I recommend it? Yes, but it depends on your context. How's that for an honest answer? If you have other questions about specific applications or whether you think it might be useful for you, I would welcome your feedback or questions down below in the comments section, and I will certainly attempt to answer them to the best of my ability. Until next time, all my erudite friends, keep reading.